All right, so section 9.3, we're finally ready to talk about how do we actually add two vectors. So you'll remember a few days ago we talked about drawing vector A and then putting vector B on its tail, like so, and that gave vector R. So our big question today is, how do we find vector R? Well, the answer is we find AX like we did in the last section, and we find AY like we did in the last section. Then we find BX and BY, just like we did in the last section. And then notice what happens. RX is AX plus BX. So there's Rx. And then you've got the same thing with Ry. Ry is AY plus BY. Once we know Rx and Ry, once we know this distance and that distance, we can use the Pythagorean theorem to find this distance. So R is going to be the square root of Rx squared plus Ry squared. And then we need to find the angle. To find the angle, we can find a reference angle using tangent, because tangent of this angle would be y over x. That's ry over rx. Now we're putting absolute values on it so that it always gives us the answer in quadrant 1. And then once we have the answer in quadrant 1, once we have the reference angle, we will then have to think about which quadrant are we in, and then go back and find the original angle. All right, sounds like a lot, and it's kind of time consuming, but it's not awful, as I think you'll see here in a minute through this example. Okay, it says, using components, find the magnitude and direction in standard position of the resultant vector. Show all your work. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to find AX and AY. AX is 145 cosine 68.3 degrees, and AY is 145 sine 68.3 degrees. I'm grabbing my calculator. 145 cosine 68.3. I'm going to keep things to 3 significant digits since that's what I have here. 53.6. Do the same thing over here. $135. All right, so there's AX and AY. Now we repeat. We find BX and we find BY. So same thing over again, different numbers. This is going to be 264 cosine 190.5 degrees. And this will be 264 sine 190.5 degrees. Back to the calculator. 264 cosine 190.5 negative 260, and BY is 260. Just go back, change the cosine to a sine, and we get negative 48.1. All right, now what we do is we add those together. So there's a reason I put AX here and BX there, and AY there and BY there. What we want to do now is get RX And the way we get Rx is to add AX and BX. 53.6 minus 260, 206 minus 206.4. And then we do the same thing over here. We get Ry. We add those together. 135 minus 48.1, 86.9. All right, we're almost there. Now, think about what we have. Think about what we have in a picture here, maybe. We have Rx, and we have Ry. What we want is R. Slide that over so you can see the whole thing. We want R. So it's just Pythagorean theorem. So R squared is negative 206.4 squared. Make sure you put that in parentheses because that minus sign has to be squared too. If you leave the parentheses off, you're going to get the wrong answer. So watch out for that. Plus 86.9 squared. All right, so I grab my calculator. Negative 206.4 squared plus 86.9 squared. Okay, and then I take the square root of that answer. So R is 224, I'm going to call it. R is 224. We're almost done. One more thing to do, that's to find the angle. So I'm going to find the reference angle, and then after I find the reference angle, I will use it to find the angle in standard position. That's really the answer I want, that angle theta. And that doesn't look like a theta, it looks like a 0 with a fish inside it. That's better, theta. All right, so again, looking at the picture, we know tangent of this angle is opposite over adjacent. Except we're going to just make everything positive because we want the reference angle, we want the acute angle. So we're going to say tangent of theta sub r is 86.9 over 206.4. Again, we only use the positive numbers here. That'll give us theta sub r. I use my tan inverse. Make sure I'm in degrees, I am, that's good. Tan inverse of 86.9 divided by 206.4. That's 22.8 degrees. But again, that's not the right answer, but it's close. That's the reference angle, that's the angle in here. We want that answer. So our final answer, theta, is halfway around 180 degrees minus our reference angle. .80 minus 22.8 is 157.2 degrees. Okay, so that's it. That's the section. So I hope this makes sense. This, in my opinion, is not particularly hard, but it is pretty time consuming just to do one problem. So for every problem here, you're going to have to find AX and AY, then BX and BY. So you've got to know these formulas. You got to know that AX goes with cosine, AY goes with sine. You just got to know those formulas flat out. There's no way around it. Then you add them. That's pretty easy. Pythagorean theorem. That should be pretty easy. And then the last thing is recognizing that you've got tangent. And so you recognize which quadrant you're in, you get your reference angle, get your final answer. Now, truthfully, I didn't really need to draw this picture. I should have been able to look and say, well, my X is negative, my Y is positive, that's quadrant 2. So I should have known I get my reference angle and then convert it to quadrant 2. But drawing a picture always helps me. I almost always like to draw a picture for these problems. Helps me ensure that I'm getting my answer in the correct angle, in the correct quadrant. All right, so that's it for this section.